Hello and welcome to the second part of our lecture on ethics. In this part, we will actually start talking about ethics, and in order to analyze ethics and analyze what its role is in science, it's very important that we make a distinguishment between ethics and morals. When we talk about ethics and morals in life, we usually think about decision making. Like we know that morals and ethics are somehow involved in giving us direction in life and taking decisions and separating the right from the wrong decision. Now, how do they differ? Because we know they both influence the way we make decisions, but how are they different? Looking at the heritage of the word, moral originates from the Greek word mos, meaning custom. And that's exactly what it is. It refers back to a custom, a value. And it is often, in comparison to ethics, much more individual. It's an internal concept that is described as the social, cultural, and religious beliefs or value that an individual has and that tells him what is wrong and what is right. So it's more of a moral compass than a set of rules. Ethics, on the other hand, also originates from a Greek word, ethikos, and that means character. And character is in this case meant more as an attribute. And ethics, in contrast to morals, is not internal. It's an external concept. It's not an individual concept, but a concept that applies to a certain group of people. It's a branch of philosophy that deals with the principles of conduct of an individual group and provides guidelines and rules. So it's an external concept that tries to provide a framework for a certain group of people to make the right decision from a societal point of view, not from a personal point of view, but some common ground that is provided to give people guidelines on how to take a decision. Now, morals deals with principles of right and wrong, whereas ethics deals with right and wrong conduct. So ethics is more like guidelines to judge whether or not something you do is right or wrong, whereas morals belongs to yourself. It's your principle, it's what you feel is right and wrong. In this sense, morals do differ from society to society and culture to culture, but they can often transcend borders. For instance, thou shalt not kill is a moral principle that is shared among multiple cultures, multiple societies, and is kind of a universal truth. Ethics is an external framework, an external set of rules that is thought to be universal and objective, but is more focused, on the other hand, than morals. Ethics are only applied to a certain group of people at a certain amount of time. So in our case, scientists, and also only now, it's very much possible that ethical guidelines will be different in 100 years. And that also depends, of course, on society. So there is a bit of an influence on ethics by society. Now, it is often very difficult to distinguish moral dilemmas from ethical dilemmas. If we take a very easy example, the example one should not lie. Well, this is obviously a personal thing, although a very universal moral principle. It's up to you whether you adhere to this principle or not, and you make judgment calls whether to live up to this principle or not at all times. Now, if we slightly rephrase the dilemma and ask ourselves, should lying be permissible if it is for a good purpose? Again, that is some kind of involving a moral compass, a moral conflict, but you try to make it into a rule. You try to provide a framework to help people judge whether or not it is permissible to lie in certain circumstances. So this would be more of an ethical dilemma because you also have to think about under what conditions can I lie. Now, sometimes the difference between both can be very, very, very thin. If, for instance, the son of an influential politician commits a crime and this politician uses his power to free his son from legal consequences, this would usually be a dilemma or a behavior that would be regarded as immoral rather than unethical, because obviously the politician should know and probably also knows that what he's doing is actually wrong. He does it anyway, but he knows deep down inside that it should be wrong. So it's more of an immoral behavior than an unethical behavior. But on the other hand, politicians usually are part of a political party that has a certain code of conduct or a certain reputation that it adheres to, and also probably has some ethical guidelines within the party. So it can also be unethical in that sense and can lead to the politician being fired or having to resign. If, for instance, a close relative comes to you and you have a company, and that close relative arrives at an interview and you interview him, and he's actually pretty good for the job, and without even requesting the relative skills because you already know him or her or the qualifications, the interviewer is going to offer the position to the relative. Obviously, this is unethical because the hiring process has to adhere to objectivity. Everybody has to have the same chance, and maybe some other candidates that might have come in would probably be just as much of as good of a candidate as the candidate that is actually hired. So this is by definition unethical behavior when it comes to the hiring process. However, it doesn't have to mean that it's immoral. For instance, your moral compass might tell you that the sake and the health of your distant or your close relative is much more important than the ethical procedure of doing a job interview. On top of that, you might have a company and you might want like a candidate that you know that is good, that you know that is good and that can help you very soon. Like you don't have to go to the elaborate process of hiring good or screening good candidates. So morally, you might be okay with yourself, but ethically, it's definitely wrong. But here again, there's quite like an overlap between morality and ethics, and sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish between both. Sometimes it is both. Let's say that a pharmacist has a particular medicine for people and dilutes it and adulterates it and then sells it on to make more profit. Now, this is a hypothetical issue, of course, because that cannot happen because pharmacists usually receive medics or medicine that is packaged and they can't repackage it and stuff. So this is a hypothetical issue, but in this case, it would be both immoral and unethical. Obviously, the ethical code for pharmacists indicates that they should help people, and obviously, adulterating medicine and selling it as the original medicine that goes against probably every ethical guideline that a pharmacist should adhere to. On the other hand, it's also immoral because you're selling a medicine to patient that doesn't really work as well as it should. So sometimes both overlap totally. So it's very difficult to separate the both, and it is because both are connected. A very famous philosopher that was occupied with ethics was A.G. Fowler, and he made a very uh, famous quote. He said a very famous statement in order to try to connect ethics and morality to each other. He said that ethics are the science of morals, and in a way that is true because ethics is a branch of philosophy that tries to come up continuously with a new framework or a suiting framework to regulate the behavior of a certain group of people, in our case scientists, and it does so by taking as many moral viewpoints or as many moral uh, hypotheses or as many moral theories about certain behavior into account as possible, makes a meta-analysis of it, and comes up with a set of guidelines that make it workable on the one hand for the scientists in our case, but also tries to not get in too many moral conflicts, as little moral conflicts as possible. On the other hand, you could say that morals are the practice of ethics because ethics provide you with guidelines and you bring them into practice using your moral compass. In any case, the overlap between both is probably that they both refer to being right or wrong, to attitudes being right and wrong. And whereas ethics are broad principles about being right or wrong, morals are a little bit more vague individual values and beliefs about being right or wrong, where morals apply only to yourself and everybody has morals. Ethics apply to everyone, at least in a certain field or a certain group of people that they are intended for. And the connection between morals and ethics often lies in values are qualities that signify what is important and worldwide. That can be personal, but also important and worthwhile to society that we find as a society to be important and worthwhile. And In this way, they are both the basis for moral codes that we have, but are also the basis for ethical norms we have. And values, in contrast to ethical norms that we vote on, are subjective. They are based on family, religion, culture, social background, and gender. And this is how values are influenced by external components, and that is also how morals are influenced by components. And although ethics should provide a universal objective framework, in many cases they are the result of analyzing morals and values in society and trying to incorporate them in a set of guidelines to judge whether or not the end justifies the means. And this is very important for the remainder of the lecture. Thank you for your attention.